Mapping underwater cave systems is an extremely dangerous undertaking. Divers descend deep into a pitch-black cave that has either never been entered or has only been entered a few times to verify safe conditions for survey. In most cases, technical diving with extra equipment and vast experience is required. Even with this experience, the potential for accidents is extremely high. This is the Dismal Sink cave diving disaster. In May of 1988, a group of divers were mapping the Little Dismal Sink in Leon County, Florida. The group included 3 separate parties that were all in the cave at the same time. The divers that day included some of the best and most respected divers of the time, like Parker Turner, Bill Gavin, Bill Main, and others. The objective was to collect geological data and survey data for the last bit of the upstream and downstream tunnels of the deep section. The deep section, as its name indicates, was the deepest part of the cave, and just to get to the deep section, a diver must enter the sink and navigate several extremely narrow restrictions: the peanut room, or the first room, and then the second room. After the second room, the divers could make their way to the fourth room by either the third room or the narrow shortcut connecting the second room to the fourth room. Finally, the fifth room is where the upper passage ends. The upper passage, at this point in time, was fairly well understood, particularly the first few rooms. The upper passage was approximately 700 feet long and at its lowest point reached a depth of approximately 150 feet. However, on the floor of the fifth room, known as the well, was a hole leading to a near vertical shaft taking the divers to approximately 170 feet deep, where they entered the sixth room at the deep section of the cave. The deep section includes the sixth room, the deep upstream tunnel, and the deep downstream tunnel. The upstream tunnel reaching a known depth of approximately 220 feet, which was the operational depth for this dive. Diving to 220 feet for extended periods requires not only special certifications in technical diving and an acute understanding of decompression diving, but also specialized equipment. For this story, the function and use of a dry suit must be understood. A dry suit is a waterproof suit that provides a pocket of air inside and provides thermal protection from cold water at depth. As a diver goes deep, the water pressure increases, compressing the dry suit and the air pocket inside. To prevent the diver from becoming vacuum sealed, as the diver goes deeper and deeper, more air needs to be added from the cylinders. Therefore, when the diver is at the deepest, the most air is in the suit. However, this presents a problem. Upon ascent, the pressure outside of the suit decreases, causing the air inside the suit to expand, increasing the diver's buoyancy. To avoid becoming too buoyant, the diver vents off the air through a vent valve. Therefore, the suit can be used to control the buoyancy of the diver. It is essential for the safety of the diver to understand how much air they have in their suit and how this affects their buoyancy as they ascend. Losing control of their suit, particularly while cave diving, could literally lead to a life or death situation. The divers suited up and entered the Little Dismal Sink on May 15, 1988. Upon entering the first room, the divers separated according to plan. Parker Turner and Shirley Bailey stayed in the first room collecting rock samples, while Bill McFadden, Bill Main, and Bill Gavin headed deeper into the cave to the fifth room, then through the vertical shaft into the sixth room and the lower section. This is where they split. Bill Gavin headed into the downstream tunnel alone. Bill Gavin was extremely experienced, and even at this point in time, he was a very well-known diver for his experience in deep diving. Gavin was a U.S. naval engineer who had extensive deep sea and cave diving experience. He had also designed his own dive propulsion vehicle, or DPV, the Gavin Scooter, which, with modifications and advancements through time, provides greater distance and mobility to cave divers. William Hogarth Main, or Bill Main, was also a cave diving pioneer. He developed the Hogarthian gear configuration used in the do-it-right, or DIR, approach to scuba diving. The Hogarthian method became widely known as it was used by both Main and Gavin, as well as others diving as part of the Woodville Karst Plain Project, or WKPP, to map cave systems from Tallahassee, Florida to the Gulf of Mexico, including Waukulla Springs and Leon Sinks, the largest underwater cave in the United States. It's an understatement to say that Gavin and Maine were extremely experienced divers and up to this task. The third member of the group surveying the deep section was Bill McFadden. Bill McFadden was only 32 but had plenty of dive experience. He had many deep dives and was a local of Tallahassee. He had 40 dives in Dismal Springs. Of those, 15 were deep. McFadden was also known for cave mapping, and his artistry in transforming his mental image of the interior of a cave to an accurate map was renowned. These 3 divers were specifically selected by the groups because of their backgrounds. The combination of years of experience of Gavin and Maine, paired with the local experience of McFadden, provided great confidence that this survey dive would be a success. Bill Gavin exited the 6th room into the downstream tunnel to survey that area alone. The other 2 Bills, Maine and McFadden, started into the upstream tunnel. Maine led the way as they slowly progressed through the tunnel. He tied the guideline as McFadden followed. McFadden stayed on the line, utilizing a compass for direction and taking notes on his survey slate, as McFadden was attempting to navigate the tunnel along the line, while also handling his compass and taking notes on his survey slate. On 2 occasions, his equipment became entangled with the line. First, his battery became entangled. McFadden couldn't get it untangled on his own, so Maine had to come back and help release the battery from the line. Next, McFadden's safety reel became entangled. This was quickly fixed, but both events slowed progress. Further slowing progress was the condition of the tunnel. The upstream ceiling in places was only 3 feet high, and the floor was extremely silty. This is not ideal for surveying. If the divers kick up the silt, visibility can reduce to 0, making it impossible to perform their duties. Therefore, they had to go slow and be extremely careful to not kick up the silt. However, even under these difficult conditions, they were able to successfully map a large area of the upstream tunnel. As their gas was running low, Maine signaled that it was time to head back. Overall, though slightly slow going, the dive had been a success. Maine led the way back along the guideline that he had placed earlier, and again, McFadden followed. Along the way, they were still careful not to kick up silt, as this can be extremely dangerous if a diver loses the line and cannot see to get back to it. On a couple of occasions, McFadden stopped to survey and update his notes. Maine simply waited until McFadden was finished, and they carried on. They were going more quickly on the way back to the 6th room, and on a couple of occasions, they did kick up some silt. Maine was careful to stop and look back and make sure that McFadden was with him when the water was clear. When the visibility was reduced, the divers held on to the guideline that Maine had attached earlier. This guideline led directly to the 6th room. After kicking up silt on a couple of occasions, visibility was reduced in those sections of the tunnel. This occurred before the exit of the tunnel, making visibility in and out of the tunnel 0. Maine swam through the silty water, then into the clear, dark water of the 6th room, and waited on McFadden, and waited, and waited. After a short time, Maine realized that McFadden should have exited the tunnel, and began heading back in to look for him, when he realized a light from behind. Bill Gavin had finished surveying the downstream tunnel, and was heading for the shaft to exit the 6th room. Maine quickly swam to Gavin, and communicated to Gavin that McFadden was still in the upstream tunnel, and was overdue for exit. Gavin immediately swam into the upstream tunnel. He traversed the entrance where the silt had been kicked up. It was black, with 0 visibility. He kept the line, but searched with his hands as much as he could. Suddenly, the silt cleared, and he entered an area with high visibility, and found McFadden. McFadden was off the line, but okay. Gavin got McFadden and brought him back to the line. Both divers swam back along the line to the 6th room, where Maine was waiting just outside of the tunnel. They took a very quick moment. Everyone was okay. However, they were low on air. They had spent precious time swimming back to search for McFadden. They needed to get back as quickly as possible. They knew at this point that they were going to be cutting it very close. They headed toward the shaft leading to the bottom of the 5th room, the well. At the well, Gavin hooked up to the dive propulsion vehicle, the DPV. If it wasn't for the DPV, the likelihood of them making it out would have been near 0. As they hooked up to the DPV to get ready to leave, McFadden got Gavin's attention and communicated that his air was out. Gavin immediately gave McFadden his long air hose. Now Gavin and McFadden were sharing Gavin's air. Gavin started the DPV and they began accelerating to the 5th room. As they ascended, they had to vent air from their dry suits. As they motored up through the 5th room, Gavin and McFadden were both breathing from Gavin's air as McFadden was out. Maine was breathing from his air, but running low, even making good time using the DPV. They were cutting it close. As they ascended, Gavin vented his dry suit to avoid becoming overbuoyant. But it didn't matter. McFadden was hanging on to Gavin's manifold and had lost control of his suit and was panicking. Maine saw what was happening and grabbed McFadden's legs in an attempt to control his buoyancy. When they finally got McFadden stopped, the three men had risen 80 feet in a very short time. And the buoyancy was still wrong. They were now in the bell ceiling of the 5th room. Gavin checked his air. He was now down to 1000 psi. This was certainly enough for a single person to get back to the decompression tanks that were staged 700 feet away and using the DPV for propulsion. However, with 2 people sharing this air and McFadden stressed and breathing heavily, Gavin knew that they couldn't make it. He tried to get McFadden to release his manifold and share with Maine, who at this point had more air, but McFadden was stressed and wouldn't release Gavin's manifold. There was no time to waste. Gavin fired up the DPV and accelerated toward the 4th room, dragging McFadden, while Maine held down McFadden's legs, reducing drag and quickening their escape. They made it through the 4th room, then the 3rd, all the while breathing precious air, but somewhat under control. It wasn't smooth by any means, as McFadden's buoyancy was still not under control, and he was stressed, but they were making good time and progressing toward the decompression tanks. They took the shortcut into the 2nd room, then through the duck under from the 2nd room to the 1st. Again, McFadden lost control of his dry suit, causing the group to suddenly ascend from 100 feet to 60. At this point, Maine realized that he could pull his knife, cut into McFadden's suit, releasing the air, reducing the buoyancy. Then Gavin and Maine could drag McFadden to safety. However, this could only work if they could actually drag McFadden to safety. A second possibility is that McFadden would panic when he felt the sudden rush of cold water. If this happened, it would certainly be a death sentence for McFadden and possibly Gavin if they couldn't free Gavin from McFadden's grasp. So, Maine decided against this and to continue trying to control McFadden to the exit. But he knew that getting everyone through the 2 upcoming restrictions was going to be nearly impossible. They pushed on, trying to reach the decompression tanks. They made their way to the balcony, then the low bedding plane just before the 1st restriction. Gavin's regulator started breathing harder and harder. His air was out. Gavin's mind was racing. He thought of how ironic it would be to make it so close to the exit and still end up drowning. McFadden switched to Maine's long hose, and Gavin was out of air. Now, Gavin and McFadden were empty, with Maine having the only air supply. Gavin's lungs were burning as he noticed that McFadden was on Maine's long hose and that Maine only had 1 regulator. Maine was now in control and handled it well. He saw that Gavin was struggling and quickly gave him the regulator. Gavin took 3 large breaths, thinking that they would be his last. He was numbed by the lack of air, stressed, and severely incoherent. So close to the exit, and he had resigned himself to death. Suddenly, he felt a release of pressure. McFadden let go. He was unconscious and drifting away. He was dead. But Gavin was still incoherent and resigned. Maine grabbed Gavin and drug him through the restriction, sharing the regulator, and Gavin slowly coming to, and became more and more coherent. They reached the decompression and oxygen tanks just in time. They began their very long decompression, knowing that their friend, Bill McFadden, had died just moments before, and his body was just below them. An autopsy later revealed that Bill McFadden suffered an embolism, where nitrogen gas bubbles form in the tissue or bloodstream during rapid ascent, which occurred multiple times during their dive. These gas bubbles can be released into the brain, heart, or lungs, depending on the location of the formed gas, ultimately resulting in death. Bill McFadden had 40 dives in Little Dismal, and 15 of which were deep. He also dived Sherrill Sink and Sullivan Sink. This dive was extremely difficult, but McFadden was experienced and an extremely capable diver. However, no diver truly knows how they will react when an accident occurs at depth until it happens to them. Though this dive ended in tragedy, analysis of these events has brought many changes to equipment and procedures, and cave diving is truly safer because of it. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.